Um, Let me go ahead and do my introduction for Carol here. My wife lost her father nearly 4 years ago. The estate was not set up well, and I would be lying if didn't say that it strained some relationships at the time. And this is a time when we should have been coming together, right? So investing in your estate and your estate plan is like investing in your family's stability. And with that in mind, I want to introduce estate planning attorney Carole Callaghan with Carole Callaghan Law.
Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well tonight. Thank you for the introduction. Again, during this presentation, if you have come up with a question, you can type it in the chat and I'll hit those questions at the end. Or at the end, you can just shout out a question that you have. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is navigating retirement planning from an estate planner's perspective, which might seem a little bit weird because I do estate planning. I don't do retirement planning. But there is a whole lot of overlap between estate planning and retirement planning. And so I want to talk about what those overlaps are and things that you might want to think about when you're thinking about both your retirement planning and your estate planning. There's three kind of categories that I'm going to divide this into. The first category is financial planning for your future. So you're still alive, you still need your money. I'm going to talk about where estate planning can help you with that. Then we're going to talk about estate planning in your death and planning, especially tax planning for your death. And then finally, I'm going to talk about what is really interesting to me right now, which is estate planning for your heirs' lives. And so that is looking at when your beneficiaries inherit property from you, what can you do now to make sure that that is best set up for them in the future? So, looking at the first part of that, financial planning for your future, the most important thing that an estate planning attorney can do that is not involved, does not involve your will or your trust, is setting up a financial power of attorney for you. The financial power of attorney is the document that someone can use when you either become incapacitated or when you just need help with your managing your finances. And so a financial power of attorney can do things like pay your bills. They can schedule appointments for you. They can make investment decisions for you. They can give money to other people for you. And that's all done through the document that's called a financial power of attorney. It's an incredibly important document, and any estate planning attorney that you go to is going to make sure that you have a financial power of attorney. It's so important that when I do a probate for somebody, the person that comes in to talk to me about the probate, I'm going to make sure they have a financial power of attorney because it's just something everybody needs. If you are an adult in the United States of America and you have a single bank account, you should have somebody named as your financial power of attorney to take over if something happens to you and someone needs to manage that. If you don't have that document, then what happens is somebody's going to have to go to court and they're going to have to get what's called a conservatorship set up for you. And a conservator is a financial power of attorney that is limited in what they can do and that a court oversees, which means there's going to be a lot of court time. There's going to be filings that have to be done with the court. They have to account for every penny. They can't do some investments. If they want to make an investment decision, they might have to go to the court to do that. So it becomes very time consuming and expensive. You don't want that. So the way to avoid that is to have a financial power of attorney. And that is the single most important thing that any estate planning attorney can do for you with regard to planning for your retirement is making sure you have that document. There's other things though. So if you have a small business, then an estate planning attorney should be talking to you about business succession planning. And that would be when I retire, what happens to my business? If you have a franchise, then the documentation from the franchisee might state, here's what happens to your business when you retire. Usually it's that it gets sold to another person. If you have a small business that isn't a franchise, do you want to make sure that business continues? Is it a business that can continue beyond you doing the job? So, for instance, my law practice is going to go away when I retire because Carole Callaghan Law will not be a thing anymore. But if I had Carole Callaghan and Associates, then it might be something that continues beyond my retirement. And so I would need to make sure that I think about that and what does it look like and who's going to take over running the business? Is it going to be a family member? Is it going to be, am I going to sell it to somebody? If I sell it, how do I value it? All of those kinds of things are part of business succession planning. And that's something that you need to do, especially if you are running a business. You need to make sure that you have that in order to prepare properly for retirement. The next thing that an estate planning attorney might be talking to you about is lifetime giving. So if you do any charitable giving or if you do any family gifting now, then it's really important that you set up your financial power of attorney so that your agent can continue doing that for you upon your incapacity, if that's something that you want to have happen. The other thing is that I'm going to get into in a couple of other slides is there might be charitable giving that you need to start thinking about doing now in order to create the estate that you want to have when you pass away. And so thinking about those things now can give you the peace of mind going into retirement that you are helping others in whatever way that is. If that's family gifting, maybe setting up 529s for grandchildren or nieces and nephews, or doing charitable giving where you can feel the benefit of your philanthropy while you're still alive. Um, Estate tax planning, which is the last thing on this list, also kind of goes hand in hand with that because charitable giving is a great way of doing tax planning. And so you might want to talk to your estate planning attorney about whether that's something that you want to do, what it will do for your estate taxes. And then you might want to talk to your CPA or your financial planner or Josh about how that can help you with financial planning for your retirement. And then the last thing I want to talk about is financial security. So this is really something that a financial planner does, but part of what I think is important to do with my clients is to understand what their financial picture looks like and to make sure that they have available income sources in retirement. And if they don't, then I need to send them to someone like Josh so he can help them get set up to where they do have those available sources of income. And then another thing that I might recommend to clients is insurance. If they're in kind of the right zone for needing insurance for things like long-term care. So you can actually buy now insurance policies that are life insurance policies. So if you die, then your beneficiaries are going to get the benefit of that. But while you're alive, if you need to go into long-term care and you don't have the resources to pay for that, then your life insurance policy can actually provide that resource to you. So that's something that I would mention to clients, but then I'm going to send you somewhere else to do that because that's not something that I, as an estate planning attorney, actually do. And then we get into what everybody thinks about when they talk about, I need an estate planning attorney, and that's planning for your death. And so typically that is, okay, do I need a will? Do I need a will and a trust? Do I need just a trust? The answer to that is always no. If you have a trust, you still need a will. And I'm not going to get into why tonight, but that's kind of what most people think about when they think I need to do an estate plan. But there's a lot of other things that go into that. So one of them is making sure you have beneficiary designations. So one of the things I do with all of my clients is we talk about what their assets are. And if they're tax deferred assets like IRAs or 401ks, then I'm going to say, hey, you need to go check and make sure that you've got beneficiaries designated for that. A lot of times people already come in knowing that because they prepare to come in to see me and they check those things, which is fantastic. But if not, I'm going to give you homework. And that's going to be part of your homework is checking those things to make sure that you have that set up. And then we'll talk about, okay, do you have a desire to avoid probate? And if you do, should we do that through setting a trust up for you, or can we create non-probate assets? So what that means is if there's a box of assets that you have to go through probate in order to pass to your beneficiaries, and then there's a box of assets that you have that don't have to go through probate. The non-probate assets are things like tax deferred accounts where you have a beneficiary designation. And what most people don't know is that you can take the probate assets and turn them into non-probate assets so that your will doesn't have to be probated when you pass away. So I can help clients with making sure that their estate is set up that way. And that might mean doing deeds. And then it almost always is going to mean my clients doing homework and going and actually setting up beneficiary designations or pay on death designations on their different accounts. Um, Estate tax planning is really important. And the reason that ties into retirement planning is that there might be things that you need to do in retirement in order to avoid having an estate tax. So in Colorado, there's not an estate tax, but there is a federal estate tax. The threshold for that is if you have 15 million in assets or more, if you're an individual, which most people aren't, but there are some people that are. And there's a lot of people that are kind of right on that cusp where they might have a taxable estate. And the difference between having a non-taxable estate and having a taxable estate is huge in probate because there's a lot more work that has to be done on a taxable estate. So a client that has a non-taxable estate might want to do things in retirement, or that has a taxable estate might want to do things in retirement to make it so that they don't have a taxable estate on their death. And that can mean charitable giving during your life. It can mean making charitable bequests in your will or in your trust. Or it can mean doing other kinds of giving during your lifetime, setting up 529s, gifting to family members or friends, those kinds of things. And all of those are different things that your estate planning attorney needs to talk to you about, because if you fall into that camp, then you're going to want to go and do these things in retirement that are going to make life easier at your death for your beneficiaries when it comes to probating. Charitable giving, we talk about how it is best to do charitable giving at your death. And then business succession planning for your death, because while I said in the last slide, business succession planning during your lifetime is what happens when I retire, you also need to plan what happens if I die before I retire, and make sure that you have things set up so that your business can be wound up or it can keep running whatever it is that you want to have happen to your business in that situation. So those are all things that estate planning attorneys do regularly that you might not necessarily think about them doing before you go to see one. And then finally, the thing that I'm kind of the most jazzed about talking about is planning for your heirs' lives. And this is something where what you do in retirement can make a really big difference. And what I've been seeing a lot of lately is people that have really big um, estates that are wrapped up in tax deferred accounts. So in an IRA, a traditional IRA, or in a 401k or something like that. And so a client might come to me and have $5 million in a tax deferred account. And when they pass away, they've got a beneficiary designation, so it's going to go to somebody. But if that person isn't a spouse, and there's a few other exceptions that I won't get into, then that person is going to inherit what's called an inherited IRA. And they're going to be required to pull everything out of it within 10 years of your death. And they're going to have to be required to make minimum distributions from it every year for that 10 years. And if you've got a whole bunch of money wrapped up in an IRA, that can have really serious income tax implications for your heirs. So where they might be in a 20% bracket, it might bump them up into a 35% tax bracket. And I just made up those numbers, so don't hold them to me to them. But one of the things that I've been having to think about and talk with my clients about lately is what can we do to fix that? And that there's a lot of options, almost all of which are going to require you talking to a financial planner or someone like Josh. But the options can be doing charitable gifting during your lifetime, setting up 529 accounts that you gift annually to grandchildren or nieces and nephews or whoever it is that you would like to. Um, Spending your IRA down more rapidly than you would necessarily have to, and then investing that money in something that is a non-IRA asset so that when your beneficiaries inherit it, they aren't inheriting something that they're going to get that's going to bump them into a higher tax bracket at any point. Or maybe rolling a traditional IRA over into a Roth IRA, which does not have the same tax implications when you die. So there's a whole host of different things that can be done, and there's not any one right or wrong answer. It's really going to depend on your personal circumstances when you're deciding how you want to set up your estate. Um, and then the last things that I'll talk about really quickly, second generation planning, which is planning to make sure that your grandchildren are taken care of. And that is something that can be done during your life to make sure that that's set up in the best way possible for your grandchildren. And then charitable giving and what that can look like. And I'm a real big proponent of charitable giving. And one of the things that I always tell my clients is if you're going to give to charity in your death, the best way of doing it is through a retirement account, because charities don't have to pay taxes on that money. And so your other beneficiaries can inherit money tax free. The charity can inherit money from a tax deferred account tax free. And so it's a better situation for everybody. So those are just a few of the things that I want everybody to think about when they're thinking about going into retirement and what things they need to be doing to make sure that both they are set up in the best way possible for the rest of their lives and that their beneficiaries are set up in the best way possible after their death. And so if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask those either in the chat or just shout them out. No questions? All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Vicky.